All right, everyone, welcome to our fourth and final installment of our Black History Lecture here at the African Center for the Study of the United States. I am so honored and excited to have this guest, Dr. Alicia Fontnette. And I had to practice her last name. It's one of them Louisiana names. But Dr. Fontnette is an assistant professor of Africana Studies at the University of Delaware and a scholar activist who is dedicated to the freedom and liberation of Black and Brown people throughout the diaspora. She believes that her responsibility is to help students encounter breakthroughs in thinking and acting in the interest of social justice. Her pedagogical practice is rooted in the decolonization of and humanization of all of her students. In 2012, she became a board member of the National Council of Black Studies and currently serves as its membership chairperson. From 2012 to 2016, she held positions in both the African diaspora and the World Department and English department at Spelman College. However, it was during her tenure in K through 12 that Dr. Fontnette's instructional practices developed into an art that ensured student success. But without further ado, I'm excited about this conversation because it kind of leads us into Women's History Month, which starts on Friday, March 1st. And more than that, the sister graduated from Dillard University, and so we share that in common. And we're both from New Orleans. I know someone's going to accuse me of having a New Orleans bias because I think I had Dr. Samari Kamara and Dr. Blair Proctor, who both have New Orleans roots. But yeah, I do have a bias. So, sister,
And that's okay.
yeah, absolutely right.
And that's
so,
okay.
so welcome. I will hush up and allow you to take over, and then we can have a robust conversation about your presentation.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm really grateful for the African Center of the Study of African Americans in America. I think it's something that is really needed. I truly love and admire the work that you all are doing, especially you, my brother, having someone from Louisiana, on the continent and continuing to contribute to building that bridge that's much needed today. Thank you so much for your work.
Doc, I'm
So,
from New Orleans, not Louisiana.
well, I wanted you said let's be specific. Okay. All righty. At least I didn't say you was from Shreveport or something. But we're gonna go ahead and get started, y'all, because I'm trying to start stuff now.
Yeah, right. Right.
I'm trying to start stuff now. But
Uh,
I am going to talk about Black women today, how we are perceived, how did this get started. So I do want to start off by making sure we understand what is popular culture, right? So often when we hear the term popular culture, we automatically just think of film, we just think of media, we just think of music. But what we don't understand, or what we choose not to acknowledge, is that popular culture is rooted in culture. Culture is everyday life. It's not just something that happens when you turn on the TV, when you go to the movies, when you turn on the radio, right? So if popular culture is a form of our cultural expression, we have to understand that how we express ourselves culturally, especially in popular culture, is a site of social and political reproduction, right?
mm,
Meaning that what we see, what we hear, we internalize it to a certain extent, right? We actually start to form our identities based upon that. And because our identities are inevitably linked to our struggle for freedom as Black people in America, especially Black women, we have to understand that popular culture is also rooted in our struggles for change and freedom, right?
mm,
So if we're consistently being depicted as people who cannot achieve, as people who are less than, then we tend to equate that with our identity and who we are. So when we think about Black women in America, right? Um, and I'm gonna keep it real during this talk, right? Many
yeah.
many Black women in America are given a hard time for fighting for issues that impact them, meaning that we have this double burden. And I'm only going to talk about a double burden for right now, because let's be clear, when we talk about intersectionality, we're talking about race, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about economic, we're talking about psychological, right? There's a whole intersectional diagram of oppressions that Black women fit in. But in relation to race and gender, Black women have often carried a double burden, meaning that we have to fight in two minority groups. What does it mean to be Black, and what does it mean to be woman? And so
Mm.
often in America, Black women are penalized for fighting for Black women's issues because, hey, you're not down with the cause. You're not helping the brothers. What you're doing is selfish, because as Black women, we are seen as the matriarchs of the community. And if we turn our backs on the community and just focus on self, then we are seen as letting the community down, right?
No.
So now we are forced to choose to save everyone else and not ourselves. And I think it's so unfortunate that that is a reality for many women in America. And even you as a Black man, like we all can attest to seeing our mothers, our aunties, our grandmothers, our nanas, right? Mama best friend that became auntie. We see women make things happen in the Black community, and now that's the expectation, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about this bridge called my back as a Black woman, understanding how that when we are not allowing other people to use our backs as a bridge, we then become selfish, right? We
Yeah.
contribute to the freedom and liberation of everyone else, but then when it comes to fighting for ourselves, we are seen as selfish. So I just want to make sure that we understand that there's this double burden in Black women's lives that happen every day. So because of that, you have this neglect in scholarship that acknowledges this double burden for Black women. And because of that, and because we are misinformed, you have Black women that are often misrepresented. We are often mischaracterized. More importantly, we are misrecognized, if recognized at all, because of this factor of invisibility that happens when we are not fighting for the quote unquote cause in the larger community. So we have to understand that there's this negative depiction of Black women as matriarchs, even though we are expected to be the matriarchs, right? And then there's this depiction of Black women as these erotic sexual objects, right? So then now we get into the Mamie, the Sapphire, the Jezebel, all these common stereotypes that we are accustomed to seeing Black women in throughout, the history of film and media, right?
Mhm.
And then even when we talk about Black women, we often just see images of this hypersexuality, this overbearingness, right? And those two things come together to symbolize what it means to be Black in America, right? You're loud, and you're over domineering, and you're hypersexualized. Those are the three characteristics that we often imagine when we think of Black women in America. But how did we even get here, right?
That's the
How
question.
Yes, how did we even get to a place where Black women, and I just want to say Black people in general, are seen in such negative lights, right? So we know we had enslavement, we had my alpha, then we had this so-called reconstruction. And during this period of after reconstruction, getting into Jim and Jane Crow, we have film coming, we have cameras, we have movie productions. And one of the earliest films, 1915, right? We have to talk about it, D.W. Griffith, right? Because that was the first quote unquote popular culture image that was given to the world of what Blackness means, what Blackness represents, right? So then you have this extremely inferior perspective that's given to the rest of the world to whites, and in relation to where Black people stand. And you have to understand that this is where you get, during this time, that's where you have your Mammy, that's where you have your Jezebel, that's where you have your Sapphire, right? And you need to understand that you have these new stereotypes, like understanding new stereotypes and making sure we understand what a stereotype is, which is something that can be conformed to a fixed or general pattern, right? Especially when we standardize it and normalize it in a mental picture, right? So understanding that we know what a stereotype is, right? So then now you have these new stereotypes that play to white perceptions of Black personalities and Black bodies, right? And when we think about this era, it was a matter of making sure that Black people knew their place, that white people understood the place where Black people should be in case there was any confusion on that, right? So then now you have this thing where Blacks now appeared in movies for the purpose of entertaining white audiences, right? Within the context of social limitations. Right. So understanding that right there, right? Now, remember what I just said earlier. Cultural expression is important to social and political reproduction. I opened this presentation by saying that, right? So then now we're creating this context of social limitations in which become the expectation for Blacks. So now you see Blacks as subservient to whites as maids, mammies, domestics, sidekicks, side chicks, right? All these things in the early 1900s, right? So when you think about this inclusion of Blacks for what I call, well, what other scholars also call this white gaze, it was not created to humanize Blacks. And it surely was not created to humanize Black women particular, right? But instead, understanding that the way Black people, especially Black women, were depicted were depictions that were shaped out of white hate and white fear, right? Because now this document says you are free. This document says you are human. This document says that now you can do as you please. So we have to make sure that we create some boundaries, right? So understanding what this meant for the Black body, right? And understanding that the Black body was and still is today just as oppressed as it was during enslavement, right? And when I say oppressed, yes, we know there's political oppression, economic oppression, again, all these different intersectionalities, but understand that I'm talking about an oppression that exists within the form of media, which has resulted in what I will call white myth, right? A myth, something that is not necessarily true, but it's taken on to this cultural form that, hey, we're going to believe this, right? So when we understand the birth of a nation and how it set the tone for this, we really have to make sure we're clear on this cultural and social and political reproduction, right? So when we think about this oppositional gaze that our ancestor Bell Hooks coined, right? She defines it as, quote, essentially an act of political rebellion and resistance against the repression of the right of Black people to gaze, right? To the gaze, right? How are you seeing me? And then the question becomes, are you even seeing me? Because what you're seeing is not true. So now you're seeing an invisible representation of me, right? So you're not even seeing me. So I'm still invisible to you, right? So we have to understand this power of looking, which leads perfectly into what I want to say about looking when we think about Black women and Black bodies, right? Understanding that we have to understand that these movies that appeal to Black audiences in Hollywood, it's this focalization on the Black woman's body still serving as a means of reproduction, right? Which is where we get really caught up today with the music and things that I think our young sisters listen to in terms of this idea of, being on the stage for a paycheck. And that makes me think of our sister Sarah Bartman, right? You know, when we talk about from the cage to the stage, which is why I'm going to refer to that, right? So we know Sarah Bartman was this sister stolen from the continent, taken, literally put into a cage to be put on display, right? And what makes her so popular in popular culture is because of her large breasts, her large buttocks, right? Her protruding body parts that people were just amazed that they wanted to do what? Gaze at it, right? This oppositional gaze. So then now we have this thing where we have our sisters who are doing well for themselves financially, they are popular when it comes to the young sisters, and I get the importance of having that visibility. But when you think about the comparison we could make from the cage to the stage, what's the big difference if you're truly still putting yourself on display to be seen? Right? Still putting yourself on display as a hypersexual being, in which we really have to question this, right? So we really have to make sure that we watch this good girl versus bad girl gaze that our sisters are exposed to, especially our young sisters, right? So I just want to go ahead and I'll pause right there because I feel like what I said a lot was loaded. So if you have any questions or feedback, we could go ahead and get into it at that time before I go into the next part of my conversation.
Yeah, I would. So yes, Sarah Bartman was from South Africa. So
Mm.
she actually is well, her story, her narrative is well known here. I wanted to ask though, you mentioned this cage to the stage. Someone may push back and say, well, no, that's just respectability politics. I'm liberated. If I want to be on stage in a certain form, it is my choice and it is my freedom. It has nothing to do with me being oppressed. What do you say to that?
Mm. You know, excuse me, it's this text I like to refer to called that $1 Million Slave,
Mhm.
right? So, okay, I'm so sorry. What does one define as success? You have to have your money because you want to have a car, you want to have a house, you want to have the clothes, you want to have the designer jewelry bags, right? You want to have that white picket fence. So, yes, my sisters, you may be liberated to not be ashamed to show your body and to earn money for it. But your body has always earned money. You just wasn't getting it. And if you pay attention to your contracts, 9 times out of 10, you're still not making as much money as you're worth. Right. And then
Right.
why are you measuring your success based on your oppressor's measurement of success for himself?
Mm,
Right.
absolutely.
Who
Very
told
interesting.
right? Who told you that what you're doing will make you successful? Who told you that? Who signs your paycheck? Who drafted your contract for you, right? So then now you're measuring your perceived success based off your oppressor's measurement of success for himself and for you. So then we have to ask the question, is that really liberation? Do we really understand what freedom is in the first place?
Now that I think that is at the root of so much of what um, the confusion that we have currently in the Black community, the African American community, to
Mm-hmm.
identify what liberation truly is. Right.
Exactly.
I've recently said that too many Black folk don't want liberation; they want white acceptance. But I wanted to ask about this um, popular culture as a form of cultural expression, and take it maybe one step further and look at that age-old question: does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? Right? When we don't control our culture, in your opinion, is it possible that those who do control popular culture can therefore create um, a reality, like a tangible reality for Black Americans? What do you think about that?
Well, we have to understand that there are four major institutions of socialization: family, church, media, and school, right? Family, church, media, and school. Those are your four major institutions of socialization. So when you think about the question you asked, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? I will argue that it's life that gives the fire and passion for art, because we
Mhm,
reproduce what we know, right?
mhm,
We reproduce what we know. So from the moment you are born, you are socialized by your family. So people
mhm.
think, but then let's ask the question: what has your family been socialized by?
Right.
Church, media, school, right?
Mhm,
So when we talk about cultural reproduction and those who create the culture, do we own media outlets? Now we could argue and be, hey, but no, let's be real about it, right? Who owns the media? Who owns the school systems, especially here in America, right? Let's not even get to the church, because that's a whole nother talk we have to do when we talk about the Black church in America and the Holy Roman Catholic Church, right?
right.
And then even when we talk about family. So even though we can say your family, yes, is one of your major institutions of socialization, what or who socializes your family? So what
Mm,
power do we really have in cultural expression and reproduction if we are not producing it? You see, and that's the difference, right? We say cultural expression as a form of cultural and social and political reproduction, but who's producing in the first place, right?
mm,
And even when we so say reproduce something, what exactly are we reproducing? Are we reproducing freedom and liberation? Because that has never truly been a thing in America, if we really want to talk about it. Or are we reproducing oppressive norms and practices to where we do not realize that they are oppressive norms and practices because we are used to it? And one of the hardest things to get people, and I will argue, yes, especially Black people, to understand is what oppression is and what it looks like. Just because something is normal doesn't mean it is freedom and liberation, right?
Mm.
Just because something is legal, it does not mean it is freedom and liberation, right? So what are we
Right.
reproducing? What are we reclaiming when we never owned it in the first place in America? And I'm saying
Mm.
in America, right? Because on the continent, that's a whole nother story, right? We have a whole nother history, and
Right.
and I just want to, cut and say this, that we have to understand, as Black people in America, as African Americans, our history did not begin with enslavement. Enslavement interrupted our history,
Mm.
right? Enslavement interrupted our history. So what we know to be the norm in America has been a social and cultural reproduction of oppression.
Absolutely. Our trauma is our culture is trauma informed. Um,
Exactly.
but I want to ask about how the role that Black men have played in perpetuating these stereotypes, particularly through hip hop music. Um, and I'm about to get on my platform for a minute, my soapbox.
Ooh, trying to get me
Um,
in trouble.
uh, so my father's an older gentleman, and the music that he listened to, as a child, when I was a child growing up, the Al Greens and the OJs, and um, these songs were by men who presented as very masculine, but they were also were strong enough to be vulnerable, right? The OJs sang about last night, me and my woman, we cried together, right? However, somewhere along the line, my generation, I'll blame it on my generation because I'm from that era where hip hop switched, um, and it started out with one or two songs where we used the B word to the H word, these negative representations. And now I guess we can take a moment and talk about the black exploitation films of the 70s, the pimps and the prostitutes or whatever have you. But those seem a little bit more, they didn't have the same impact as the music had, right? You watch a movie once, you talk about it, but you can listen to a song 50 times in one day, right? So my question is, why do you think Black men have become so complicit in the degradation and in many ways the humiliation of Black women's bodies and image in popular culture? What is that driving force?
Whew. This is a conversation that always gets things heated in my classes. So understanding that all women, regardless of race, are oppressed under this thing that we call patriarchy.
Mm.
Understanding that first and foremost. Now, what many Black men don't even want to admit or acknowledge or maybe recognize is that once we had become removed from the continent for a few generations by now, right? We and I'm saying we, Black women, Black men, we didn't understand what Black malehood meant, Black masculinity meant anymore, right? The only representation we had of manhood was that plantation owner, right?
Mm.
The overseers, the white men who were also oppressing us at the same time while they were oppressing their women. So when we ask, what does it mean to be a man? Whose definition are we using? Again, notice I keep asking that. Whose definition are we using when we say you're going to be a successful man, you're going to be a successful person, right? We are using our oppressors' definitions of manhood, of success. So, as someone who is enslaving people, you're also oppressing your wife. And at the same time, Black men are seeing this on the plantation. So then now you have this thing called plantation patriarchy that is both racial and gender, right? And what it has done is that it forced Black men to redefine their masculine conceptualizations over the generations that they've been on the plantation. So then now, right, that queen that sat next to me, who helped me make decisions, and sometimes made the final decision. Now I am treating her like master treats his wife.
Mm.
Because to be a man, I make the decisions. I control things. I make sure that you have to cater to me. Now, what many Black men also adopted from that plantation is how Black women were also used for breeding, right?
Mm.
They were they literally were the help. They were concubines, hit side chicks, right?
Mm.
So all the ways in which the plantation master treated Black women, Black men adopted those same perceptions of his woman.
Mm.
But at the same time, what they failed to also realize is how this also created a difference in how they see white women, right?
Mm.
So
Let's talk
now
about
we're
that.
asking, so so
Mm.
then now we're asking the question: what does it mean to be a woman, right? What does it mean to be a woman? And if we ask a room of brothers, when you think of a woman, what do you think of? You're going to say soft, skin soft, hands soft. You're going to say she smells good. You're going to say she's clean. You're going to say she is respectful, right? She knows when to talk and when not to talk, right? Like you're going to say these things about what it means to be a woman. Now tell me this: if I'm standing next to you in that field picking cotton with you, my hand's not soft. I'm not
Mm.
clean, right? I don't know how to speak proper because I'm not being formally educated like mistress in the house, right? So then when you look at me versus this white woman now, I don't fit this cult of true womanhood's definition,
Mm.
right? So then now we have this plantation patriarchy. Now we have this plantation division perception of Black women versus white women. And then we have this patriarchal mindset that have set in for Black men in which they have to redefine and have to go ahead and affirm their own masculine power and beings.
Sister, that is absolutely powerful. Now, here's my it's not even a pushback, it is a continuation of your thought because and it comes from watching Dr. Kenneth B. Clark and Dr. Mamie Clark's doll experiment. You're very
Yes,
familiar with this.
yes,
And often we see that well, when we look at the results of that in society, and we say that's why the Black man like the white women. Look, she's taught that she is, we are taught that the white woman is the ideal. She is beautiful. She is soft. All of those things. So the result in the Black man is, for lack of a better term, jungle fever. He goes out. He's trying to find. But can we address what are the results, the impact of that for Black women? The ideal of white womanhood.
Oh. now now we get into this famous Monahan report and the perceptions of that, right? Because
Mm.
now let's also be clear too that you had more Black men in homes with their wives, black wives, Black family, and all of this, prior to drugs, 1970s,
Mm.
80s crack. Like, I just want to acknowledge that, right? But
Right.
then you do have this perception now that since Black men prefer white women because again they fit the definition of this cult of true womanhood. Now you have Black women who are responsible for the Black homes, the Black communities, the Black children. Now you have Black women who are working 2 3 jobs. Now you have Black women who have this. Now hold on, I want to back this thing up a bit. Hold on. When we talk about what it means to be a man too, this is the idea that a man is supposed to be a protector, the man is supposed to be a provider, the man is supposed to be there in the home, right? Now you have
Partner.
those
Yep.
things, right? So now when we think about Black men leaving the home to go be with those white women, now Black women have become the providers, Black women have become the protectors. So then now, because we don't know how to hold you accountable because you don't stay now, and I want to be fair and say, Not all Black men don't stay and just leave us for white women. That there are systems in place that have strategically and intentionally taken y'all out of the home, like the use and the implementation and the placement of drugs in our communities, alcoholism, right? Systemic injustice, right? So let's be clear about that, because we have some very, very good brothers who understand the assignment, as the kids say, right? But
Mhm.
understanding that we also have some brothers who have been negatively socialized to perceive Black women in this way. So putting all that together, when Black women become used to having to provide for themselves, take care of themselves, protect themselves, be there for the children, it is so hard for a brother to come in now and to play that role. And then if he doesn't measure up to this perception, then we give y'all a hard time. Now, understanding that this also goes two ways. You have Black men that want to hold Black women up to the expectation of what it means to be a white woman, and you have Black women who hold Black men up to the expectations of what it means to be a man. Again, we are both defining the roles of each other based on our oppressor's measurement of the other race, sex,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So,
Mhm.
so it's not just brothers here. I want to be clear and be fair that as sisters too, we also have adopted white measurement and perceptions of what it means to be a man.
Mhm.
And if you don't fit that measurement, we then say those things that hurt you, that emasculate Black men, as they put it, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, are we understanding how we're hurting each other and how popular culture also reinforces this, right? Because popular culture also reinforces, let's start back with Birth of a Nation, that Black men are also hypersexual, that Black men have to have more than one woman, right? So then you have Black women over the years who also have internalized that as well, not just the brothers.
We have a question in the comments. Well, let's say there's a few comments that we want to point out. Well, I'll go here. I don't know if this is a sister or a brother, but they said, does preference is or basically is preference something to consider when we're talking about kind of like those interracial relationships? Some people may say, well, I'm not, you know, holding the Black woman to this ideal. It's just my preference. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
we can go back to talking about how socialization impacts our ideas of what is preferable. So
Yeah.
just what are your thoughts on
Yeah. And I'm gonna mix it with scholarly thoughts and personal thoughts, right?
that?
You know, love is love. I think you have to ask the question, why do you have these preferences? First, what are your preferences and why? Right?
Mhm.
Do you understand why you prefer certain characteristics? Because if it's because, oh, hair and I do like the lighter skin, ask yourself why. Have
Mhm.
you been taught to think that black hair is not, that a Black woman's hair is not as soft, so it's not as pretty, right? How are you defining pretty, right? Is it an obsession with a fair skin? Then ask yourself why, right? Because I do believe that there are some social and cultural reproductions into why we prefer someone. The very first thing we're interested in when we notice someone is how they look. We haven't spoken to them yet. We don't even know if they could talk. We don't even know if they know subject verb agreement. But hey, I like how you look, so I want to approach you. Why do you like that look?
Mhm.
So that's the thing, right? So no, it doesn't matter if you are aware of why you prefer what you prefer, right? um and for me, um and this is what makes it hard to be an Africana scholar, um because I'm very much aware of our history, because I'm very much aware of my perceived place in America. It's important for me to be with someone who understands what I've dealt with when I come home.
Mhm.
See what I'm saying? Like as a brother, a Black man coming home to me, I already know that world and tried to eat you up today, right? Like I feel like I could be of comfort, and I want that same thing. I want someone that can truly understand, as a Black woman, this is what I was dealing with today, right?
Mhm.
So that's my personal perspective in relation to that. But the scholarly response, as I stated earlier, would be why. Not like, do you know why you have those preferences?
All right, I know you have a second part of your presentation, but I do want us to make sure we save time to kind of really get into this Black woman in contemporary popular culture, and maybe talk a little bit about Queen Bee. and talk a little bit about Rihanna and some of these um, interesting Black women who are very whose narrative is very complicated. I want to talk specifically about Queen Bee.
Let's do it. We could do a part two for the second part of my presentation later.
All right, so I have I, Beyonce was on the biggest stage in the world, the Super Bowl halftime show, literally the biggest stage in the world. And she she paid homage to the Black Panthers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I thought that was one of the most powerful statements that she has made throughout her career. Um, she had a song where she said, "My people need reparations." I said, "Well, go ahead, be." However, I wonder about her cosplaying as Black feminine liberation when really she is she is capitalism in blackface.
Oh, you're gonna get the beehivers coming
The
after
whole
us.
beehive about to be after.
You're gonna get the beehivers coming after us. And I have a one. Yes, I do love Beyonce, but I have a love-hate relationship with how she's perceived as this, like for example, I had major issue when her album came out, the first one that was just named Beyonce, and she had a sign she was performing and she had feminism behind her. That
Mm,
that bothered me because feminism was never for us. Even
mm,
though we can say it was rooted and Black women was there, let's be clear. Black women have always been a part of every major movement in America, okay? Even the early feminist movement, but I will never forget that they still told Ida B. Wells to get to the back of the line when she was
mm.
marching with them at Seneca Falls. I will never forget that, right?
Don't
So
forget Sojourner Truth saying, "Ain't I a woman?"
exactly, right. You have Frederick Douglass there understanding all these things. So understanding that when we talk about feminist movements and Black feminist movements and Africana womanist movements and even African womanist movements, understanding that they all have different goals, right? And that you have all these different movements because that means that feminism was not addressing the needs of Black women,
Right.
right? Now, understanding that Beyonce is this cultural pop icon, so she has to play to women of all races. I don't have to play to women of all races. So I'm going to say no. I do not agree with her giving this perception to our young Black girls that, oh, it is great to be a feminist and being a feminist is this. No, 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 no. Understand what Black feminist is and understanding that that movement was needed because white women were not addressing our needs. So how can we reclaim something that was never ours in the first place? Which is why I
Mm.
have an issue when I hear scholars, about Black women being called the B word, and then it's like, oh, we're reclaiming that word. That's kind of like saying we're reclaiming the N word. How can we reclaim something that was never ours, something that has always been demeaning and derogatory in the first place? So
Mm.
so when I look at Beyonce and her making statements, in relation to the Black body and particularly the Black feminine body, making a statement against police brutality, like in her song Formation, love it. Shot in New
Mm.
Orleans. She even had Messy Maya on there. Hey, shout out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and Beyonce has like Louisiana roots.
That's right.
Like
That's right.
I think her mom and grandma and them from like New Iberia or something, right?
Right.
Louisiana, like 2.5 hours
Right.
southwest of New Orleans. So she understands, but I do feel like there is a misrepresentation that she has given to our Black sisters in relation to what does it mean to be a feminist as a Black woman, right? So if you're going to go into those types of things and use those terms, and yes, you had a great scholar, you had to record something for your song, that does not make you a spokesperson for feminism for Black women. And
Mm.
that's a big issue I have just with her in terms of that. I do want to say, honestly, her Lemonade album made a great syllabus for a class I had one semester in terms of just how it addressed issues, with dealing with Black men, like many of the same issues that we talked about earlier. That album was a good representation of how we can talk about those issues and deconstruct them in the classroom, right? But
Mm.
when I think about the overall essence of Beyonce, as you said, capitalism. So it's not a catering to just Black women, even though as a Black woman, I do want to give her props. Like, yes, like we can't deny that, even though we don't agree with everything that she has done or is doing, right? But I do think that it's bigger than Beyonce. I do think that we have to consider that we're talking about an erasure of Black women and the legacy of racism in entertainment that we know still exists. And I feel like that's a big misrepresentation that she also gives.
Mm.
Like you still have racism in this entertainment industry, and she's given a false narrative that she's accomplished and there's no struggle and she's not dealing. And I'm like, no, 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 right? Because our young sisters see that and all they see is what she's doing, but they're not getting the true understanding of how she got there. So yes, it's about racism, you know, when I think about Beyonce as well. And I wish her work really paid more homage to, how can I say this, to her actually struggle to fame, if that makes sense, because so many people
Mm.
think she didn't struggle. So yes.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how deep you wanted me to go with Beyonce with the political realm, but I'm curious to see how you're gonna make me dig deeper into that.
Well,
And
no,
like
I
I
would.
told you, I have a love hate relationship with her.
Me too.
So
Me too. Yeah. I'm pro Beyonce some days, and then other days I can actually critique, and particularly from the embrace of Black capitalism and this kind of decadent Black veil that she presents to the world of this wealth and opulence, which is nowhere near the Black American
yeah.
story.
And she also
Um,
teaches about Black beauty too. Like even when you look at some of her albums, like you know that song "Brown Skin Girl." So it's kind of like one of these things, like you know, having a seat at the table. Like
mhm.
if we're gonna talk about cultural expression as an important site of cultural reproduction for politics, do we have to play the game? And sometimes I'm gonna, you know, have a song with Big Frida where you could shake, but then sometimes I'm gonna remind you you're beautiful, so that way I could stay uh visible for y'all. You know,
Right.
so we do have to question that too, right? Like when we talk about having a seat at the table, what we really talking about here when it comes to Beyonce for real.
Yeah. And I also think that B benefits from some of this racial hierarchy that we have. She's a light-skinned Black woman. And I'm going to point this out, and let me be clear, my wife a light-skinned Black woman too. But there was a time, and this is, I'm going to go a little bit off and come back. There was a time when the same year, Alicia Keys and India Arie released albums the same year. Now, if you press play on either one of those, this was both their debut albums. India Arie's album was written so masterfully. This was absolutely brilliant work. However, Alicia Keys' album was pretty good. I won't deny it was a good album. But India Arie was dark skinned with natural hair. Alicia Keys was light skinned with these braids in her head or whatever have you. And we see who became the superstar. So it wasn't about talent. So once again, I think that there is this, again, this racial hierarchy that has benefited Beyonce. And which is an interesting point because in the comments, and this kind of goes back to our previous conversation, but we can tie it into Beyonce because it's true for her too. As we were talking about those preferences for light or white or whatever have you. He says, this person named Inadequate says, what about the fact that Black women have adopted the white standard of beauty, like preferring weaves instead of natural hair? Um, what are your responses to that? Because and I want to say Beyonce just dropped a new hair care product, and I laughed and said, when the last time we saw Beyonce hair? But go ahead, sister. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, you know, and this black hair politics is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing. For example, before I, you know, get into that sisters are brothers comment, you know, growing up, right, between New Orleans, Abbeville, New Iberia, moved around a bit, and being of Native American and Creole, as is obvious you could see,
Mhm.
I didn't fit in because of my hair. I used to put that dark black gel in my hair to make my hair look more black. because I
Mm,
got teased for having soft hair. I remember
mm,
on wash days when it would be big and poofy, I got teased and called Diana Ross. Now, the woman I am now, I'm like, oh, bet Diana Ross, lovely. But being a young Black girl growing up, I didn't
mm,
think that was beautiful because I was, so I was told I didn't have Black hair.
mm,
And it made me feel some type of way, right? So so I was the opposite, in which I wanted to look for, things to make my hair look more Black, more hard, and whatever that meant back then. Okay, whatever that meant. I don't want to get into definitions about what I thought, but that's an example. But when I talk about the four major institutions of socialization, when did we first learn or started questioning our beauty?
on
When
the
we
plantation.
integrated. When we integrated.
Oh.
When I sat next at a high when I sat next in class to this white girl and noticed everyone admiring her and not me. That's when I
Mm,
started questioning my beauty,
mm,
right? That's when I started questioning, well, wait, everything I see on media, again, school, media, reaffirming what I see at school happening. So I'm not pretty enough. I'm not light enough. And being from New Orleans and having all these different colors and shades in our families, hey y'all, guess what? I'm not the lightest person in my family. I'm also considered one of the darkest in my family and got talked about too, right? So then now you're reinforcing the need for me to be lighter, for me to have more silky hair,
mm,
you know. So it only makes sense that we would adopt Eurocentric beauties of standard. Again, going back to the very beginning, whose tools are we using to measure our worth against?
that's
So we're using the oppressor's measurement tool for hair, for skin color, for dress, for how we talk and everything else. So if the world has always stated that white women are like, I would never, I don't know this sister's name, but it was a white lady that everybody was she was voted the most prettiest woman in the world based on like the symmetry of her
yeah,
face
yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like,
She basic. In the word,
listen,
in the
right?
words of Boosie, the rapper, she was regular.
Hey, regular, right? And I love me some Boosie with his crazy stuff. But but so that's why, and then, even when you think about outside of America, bleaching products, number one seller. The number one beauty seller cosmetic outside of America. And you could
Mm,
look that up. I'm not making that up. Bleaching creams, lightening products are the number one cosmetic seller outside of the US.
mm,
Why? Because Eurocentric standard has told us globally that white women are the epitome of womanhood, not only
yeah.
with how they look, but how they act, right?
Mm,
And which goes back to something now this is not a part of this talk right now, but I always make it clear for students. When we think about white supremacy, and when we think about the need to maintain these systems that white supremacy have created, we have to think about how these are able to stay in place.
mm,
It is through the white woman's womb. That's why everything that white men have done, I will argue, has been to protect white women in her womb so that way he can continue to exist. So, of course, I'm going to teach you that Black women are filthy, that Black women are not beautiful, that Black men are not worthy of you. Of course, I'm
mm,
going to teach that and reproduce that because I have to make sure that my longevity, that I am here so I can be on top, right? How many of us have heard stories, or even some people watching, you have dated of the other race, white men or white woman, but guess what? Did they end up marrying you? Probably not. In some cases, yes. Okay. I have a brother-in-law. Well, he's my cousin-in-law, but my cousin is like my sister. You know how we do. Hey, she
yeah.
married a white boy. Hey. If you know anything about some white men in Louisiana, they act more, Black than, some of us sometimes. And I love me
Right.
some Jared, right? But at the same time, that's a unique situation. So many white men don't marry Black women,
Mm,
especially in Louisiana. So many white men don't marry Black women at all. Why?
mm,
Because I need to make sure that I have a legacy and my legacy can't be tainted with Black blood, right?
mm.
I need to make sure that my sons and daughters are born in their privilege.
Absolutely. I was looking up because when you mentioned about like the entire system that was created was to protect even the patriarchal system was essentially designed to protect white womanhood, because as you said, that it is their wombs that produce more white men to maintain the system. And that was an argument that Dr. Tommy Curry, I've seen him present, the author of The Man Not. Um, I guess we can go back to Beyonce momentarily. Well, somebody asked about the skin bleaching. Um, I don't necessarily want to touch on skin bleaching, but I do want you to maybe to address the reason why there is a certain aesthetic that helps to that appears to help um, Black women achieve in popular culture, right? We can name maybe Viola Davis. I'm trying to think of another dark skinned sister.
Lupita, that's my girl.
Lupita,
Lupita, yes.
Lupita, absolutely. But when we could probably give us a good five, right? But then when we look at all of the other Black female celebrities, there's a certain hue and there's a certain look to them. Um, I'm jumping around, but somebody once told me if you look at the mayors of New Orleans, the Black mayors of New Orleans, there's a certain hue to them, right? So what?
Lighter than me and you.
Right, right. So, but we create these stars as Black people, right? Before they're crossover stars, they are our kind of stars first, right? We are the supporters. So why do you, in your opinion, is that still a part of that racial hierarchy in our brains that we want to present the lighter, prettier Black female form to the world? And then if
Yes.
it is, how do we combat that? Because imagine being a dark-skinned sister in fifth grade, and and you hear Drake and the rappers talking about I got a red bone, or whatever have you, and that's not you. How do we let leave that alone? Let's talk about the dark-skinned sisters and how can we elevate them in popular culture? How can we combat this kind of color hierarchy? Um, um, against the darker skin tones of Black women, because I personally believe if anybody has it hard, it's a dark skinned Black woman. That's the if within the Black woman struggle, if there is a hierarchy there, the dark skinned Black woman has it the worst.
Yes. I would have to agree as well, especially when we think about opportunity, which we know contributes to one's economic success. Like I could easily say, especially, growing up living in Louisiana, I know that some opportunities were afforded to me, not necessarily because of my brain, but because of my look. And that's a thing, right? Like we have to be honest, that's a thing. Um, but okay, so I'm gonna back it up a little bit. When we think about this complexity we have with our identity and colorism in the Black community, and this is something that everyone should know, but if you don't, I'm gonna repeat it. This started on the plantation, right? So
Yeah.
once you have master that's sleeping with our sisters that's enslaved, creating these mixed babies, you have this new race that's being created now because of who this child was. He or she is getting treated a little better, right? He or she gets a job in the house. Notice this, right? I need to get in the house. I need to get to the table. So looking this
Mm.
way afforded that, this house Negro versus field Negro, going back to Brother Malcolm, right?
Mhm.
So understanding that it created this jealousy, but it created this norm to where, hey, if my skin is lighter, I'm going to be seen a little more because we still have our issues as a mixed race. I'm going to be respected a little more. I'm going to be acknowledged. I'm going to have access, right? I'm going
Mm.
to have access, right? So understanding how over the years all we did was do what? Again, what did I say earlier? Our popular culture and things that we make as the norm become social and political reproduction, right? Notice how that has never left this conversation, this social and political reproduction. So now we have reproduced generation after generation after generation. Having lighter skin allows you to be afforded more access, more opportunity, right? You can actually get married and marry up, as they say in Louisiana, right?
Yeah.
You can actually do that, right? Like I tell people all the time, you know, like when it comes to my son's father, one reason that I did marry him was because he was so dark, because I knew that was something that was not expected, right? And you know, we like to rebel being women, you know, we rebel, right? So I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna do this just because he told me to. Now, mind you, my great grandfather was one of the blackest men I knew, and my mama was as white as could be. But how do we have an issue with, you know, who your children marry, but yet you married one of the darkest men, right? You know, it's
Right.
like growing up in a family where you literally would hear, you know, oh Lord, my grandbaby gonna be black. And it's like, what does that mean?
Checking his ears, checking the baby
Yeah,
ears.
yeah, yeah. Let's see how dark he gonna be. Oh Lord, right? And that's really a thing, right? So it's gonna go back to something else that never left this conversation. Why are we continuing to use our oppressor's measurement of success and what it means to be somebody? Why are we using his tool? Why are we using his measurement of beauty? Why are we using his measurement of success? Why are we using his measurement for defining who we are and to determine if we are someone? That's what that goes back to. Understand, and brother Malcolm, you know, this month, you know, the anniversary of his assassination, right? Brother Malcolm asked the question best: who taught you to hate yourself?
Mm.
Isn't
It's
it
just,
funny how that question still is relevant today?
I think that's, I know we're about to wrap up here. I think that is the interrogative that we must contend with for probably the next few generations until we really, we can come up with the answer. We're gonna say, oh, the white man, but are you really ready to then reject that what he taught you, right? That internalized white supremacy, that internalized self-hate, right? That dehumanization and infrahumanization that we have now internalized. Are you ready to reject that? So the next part of that question is, who taught you to hate yourself? And are you ready to reject that hatred? And I think many of us have are just not ready to go there. I don't know why.
Yeah. You
Again,
see,
I
but
go
that
back.
goes back to what I think what you was going to earlier with Beyonce, right? So how do we take these things that's there and celebrate it, right? And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, from the cage to the stage, right? How do we take these negative representations and celebrate it? So one of the things that I did notice about even with her Lemonade album, right? We know that it was a display of the black woman body, right? And we know that it transgressed all boundaries, right? It was about the body. It was about the body as a commodity, right? And we know that that was not something radical or revolutionary that she did, right? We know that from slavery to present day, black bodies, clothed, unclothed, hey, they've been bought and sold, okay? But what
Mm,
made it different, what made this idea of commodification different in Beyonce's Lemonade album was that it was more of a seduction, it was more of a celebration, it was more of a delightment, right? Meaning that, hey, we're going to challenge this devaluation of the black woman's body and dehumanization of it, and we're going to make sure that you see that it's powerful, and I'm going to confront you with it, and I'm gonna get paid, right?
mm.
So it's like, where is that line with that though, right? Like, again, how do we reclaim something that was never ours in the first place? I'm not talking about the black woman's body. I'm talking about capitalism. I'm talking about the commodification of the black woman's body. That was never ours in the first place. So then the question becomes, why do we want to take that and own it and celebrate it? And it's a perplexed, you know, issue and conversation, right? Because you're still contributing to the exploitation of the black woman's body, but yet you're saying, well, now we're just going to celebrate that exploitation and get paid. And that's a
Doc,
fine line for me. That's a fine line for me. I don't know how I feel about that yet.
Doc, we are coming up on 2 minutes, but this conversation has to continue. So what, I mean, I know Black History is over, but we do have Women's History Month coming up. Let me put you on the spot. Are you, maybe towards the end of the month of March, will you come back to do another presentation on whatever you want to talk about?
Just a part two, just a continuation, part two, right?
Yeah, yeah, we have to do it. But I want to thank you so much for coming today. I will definitely be in contact with you via email
Yes.
about those other things that we talked about. Thank you guys for tuning in to this conversation, which unfortunately is our last installment of our Black History Month lecture series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Dr. Blair Proctor, Dr. Samari Dr. Samari Kamara, and Dr. Gianni Clarkson, and of course, Dr. Alicia Fontnette. We thank you guys for your participation, and
It's been a
please
pleasure.
support Axis VITS, the African Center for the Study of the United States. We have some great things coming up for you guys. And Doc, thank you so much
Thank you
for
for having me.
this conversation, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it back and forth. I like that. So I will see you soon, and everyone have a good one.
This is bye, everyone.
Wait, I'm trying to end the live stream. There we go. This is, well, I might just have to end the meeting. All right, Doc. You